There are three ways to get faster at changing chords. The first way to do this is by moving your hand as little as possible when changing chords. The less you move your hand, the faster your chord changes will be. You can move your hand less between chord changes by planning your path before you start playing. Plan your path by looking at the chord you're playing and looking at what chord comes before and after. There are a few different ways to play each chord, and the way that you choose to play each chord will make a big difference in how fast your chord changes are. I can play the A major chord using just my first finger, or I can play the A major chord using my first, second, and third fingers. If I have to change from the B minor chord to the A major chord, I'm going to choose to play the A major chord using just my first finger. Because when I make the B minor chord shape, my first finger is almost in the exact position that I need it to be in to play the A major chord. All I have to do is move my first finger down one string and bar my finger across the D, G, and B strings. Here's an example of this chord change. This strategy is all about looking at the chords you have to play and planning your route ahead of time. Another example would be changing from E minor to A minor. I can play the E minor chord using my first and second fingers, or I can play the E minor chord using my second and third fingers. If I play the E minor chord using my second and third fingers, it makes it really easy for me to change to the A minor chord. I can keep my second and third fingers in the exact same shape, with each finger stacked one above the other at the second fret. And I actually hold these two fingers together. You can see that there is no gap between these two fingers at all. They're moving together as one unit. So when I change from E minor to A minor, I take these two fingers and move them down one string. Then I add my first finger on the first fret of the B string. Here's an example of me changing back and forth between the E minor and A minor chords. The second way to get faster and smoother chord changes is by being lazy. You need to keep as many fingers planted on the fretboard as possible. If I'm changing from the G major chord to the D major chord, you can see from these chord charts that I do not have to move my third finger at all. So I will keep my third finger pressed down on the third fret of the B string the whole time. Here's an example. You might have also noticed that my fourth finger comes up and down off the small E string during that chord change, but I only lift my fourth finger just enough so that it's not touching the small E string. Another example of a chord change where you can keep your fingers planted is the A minor to C major chord change. If you look at the chord charts for these two chords, you can see that there's only one finger that has to move. The first finger stays where it is, and the second finger stays where it is. When I change from the A minor chord to the C major chord, the only thing that moves is my third finger, from the second fret of the G string to the third fret of the A string. Here's an example of me changing between these two chords. Other than my first and second fingers leaning slightly side to side, you'll notice my first and second fingers don't move at all. Now for the final way to get faster at chord changes. The final way to get fast at chord changes is muscle memory. The only way to get muscle memory is by repeating these chord changes over and over again, practicing a little bit every day. This is just the way your brain and everyone else's brain works. The more you repeat something, the less you have to think about it. And the less you have to think about it, the quicker you can do it. So every time that you practice a chord change one more time, you make your muscle memory for that chord change a little bit stronger and faster. Soon you'll be able to change quickly between those chords, and you won't even have to think about where you're placing your fingers. To sum things up, there are three ways to get faster at chord changes. 1, by moving your hand as little as possible between chords. 2, by finding similarities between chords and seeing where you can keep 1, 2, or 3 fingers planted on the fretboard. And 3, by building your muscle memory with daily practice and repetition of chord changes. Put these 3 things to use, and I'll see you in the next lesson.